Don't mind this. This is water from my hair. It looks like I'm going like something going on with me. Okay. Hey everybody. So today's Unedited LuuLuu, and it's been a while. I'm trying to see, is this on some HDR, some filter that I don't know about? Because I know my skin don't look this good. Hold on. Okay, so I'm back. I put on my glasses and everything. This is kind of almost a two-part Unedited LuuLuu because there's two thoughts going on, but I thought this thought should come first before the next one comes. So here we go. So I wanted to talk about my first time dealing with systemic racism. You know, I'm black. You know, listen, we know I'm a black chick. Okay. So anyway, let's just go on with this. So I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago. I moved to the suburbs when I was like 8 years old, and I moved to the far south suburbs. Now, I'm saying this because this is where this is going on. So you have to understand, I was out there in the 70s, and the far south suburbs, and I mean far south suburbs, was very country. You know, it still had a very kind of country vibe. You know, people had horses. You know, I went to school with kids who had horses and everything. So, you know, it was that vibe. And I wound up going there. You know, of course, we were out there, but you know, there were, you know, people of color out there, but of course it was majority white. And there were pockets that were more of us, and then there were places that wasn't a lot of us at all. So I'm saying this to get to the point so you understand where I grew up. So, you know, I grew up and it was, I hung out with everybody. You know, I went to school with, white kids. I hung out with them, I had friends. It wasn't that big of a deal. But I did understand there was racism, because it was the 70s. We was right off of, civil rights. I grew up with a family that was very heavily involved in civil rights. So I understood racism, I understood what it was. But as a kid, you don't expect to, you don't think that this is going to be something that you're going to deal with. You just don't, because you don't think what is systemic racism. You don't know what that is. You just hear that people can be racist and that white people, I grew up knowing white folks didn't like me because I was black. And then, watching things about Dr. King and all those things, white folks didn't like us because we was black. Okay, so I was very clear on what that meant. But then, of course, I knew I had, white people who was nice and white people that were friends of mine. So, but I understood there was this underlying thing that a lot of white people weren't going to like me just because of the color of my skin. I was very aware of that. So this happened when I was in 5th grade. So I was about 10 years old. And my tenure that year was very, was that year too? Maybe it was the next year. Those years were very interesting, very, very loss of innocence time for me. Yeah. And okay. So anyway, let me go ahead. So anyway, my mama, we moved a lot. So I was supposed to be going to this one school that was down the street from me. But because I was late getting my physical, because as 5th grade year, you do a physical. My school was overcrowded, so I was bused. Few of us were bused to another school in Chicago Heights. Let me just say Chicago Heights. So I was bused to a school called Roosevelt. And now Roosevelt was, down the street and everything. And I would, hey, I hang out and play. And so Roosevelt was much different than the school I came from. The school I was at was Kennedy, and it was very chill. It was very, I loved that school. It was, I had my little friends over there. Chicago Heights, for people who are not from this area, was very Italian, especially during that time, because if you know anything about, like, if you would know this, but like Al Capone had a house out there. So there was a lot of mafia people back in the early days that were out there, and they continue to live out there. And so I grew up around, the Italian kids and everything, hung out with them and everything. So there was a lot of Italians, to the point that the like few like years ago when I was a young adult, there was a huge thing where the feds had to come in because they the mayor was indicted for and they were all Italians. They were indicted for quite a few things. They wound up going to jail. Them the police, the chief of police, all of them went down. All of them. Matter of fact, they were like the parents of some of the kids I went to school with. But that's neither here nor there. Okay, so I'm just saying that. So then I go to Roosevelt, and so the climate's a little different, And so when I got there, I was in fifth grade, and no, I'm not editing, so I'm not gonna stop myself. So that school's a little. So when I was considered gifted, and I say that with that because it's stupid, but I was, so what it was is I was in fifth grade, but I had tested into seventh grade math, and I had tested into the highest level of reading, because we went to sixth grade. So I was in basically seventh grade classes. So my math and English reading classes were seventh grade classes, which were the highest level for the sixth graders. So I wasn't in the fifth grade gifted class. I had to go to the sixth grade gifted class, if that makes sense. So that was already in place when I went there. So when I get there, I'm in this class, and I notice that ain't too many of me around, right? Ain't too many black kids at this school. And then I finally saw that the only black kids were in the special ed classes. I'm not playing with y'all. This is the truth. I was the only black kid in the whole school that was not in a special ed class. Kid you not. It wasn't a lot of black kids, but the only other black kids was in special ed. So, and let's just look at me. I'm black girl beige. So, on one hand, when I came, the kids that were in the special ed class, they wouldn't play with me. Black kids wouldn't play with me. I didn't know anything. I didn't even know what special ed meant at that point. But they wouldn't play with me. They didn't do anything with me. So, matter of fact, a few of them wanted to fight me for no reason. So then I started playing, there were kids across. So I would go across and play with the kids over there. So that's that. So my grades were doing terrible, very bad. And I didn't understand it. But like when I would be in class, when I was in reading class and math class, my teachers didn't help me. I was pretty much by myself in these classes. So I would leave my fifth grade class and go to math and English with the reading and English with these gifted sixth graders, and the teachers were doing stuff, but they would not help me. I would ask for help, and they'd be like, "Oh," and they would brush me off. So subsequently, my grades were suffering. And I told my parents that my grades were suffering. But then my mother came in for a meeting, but it wasn't just that my grades were suffering. They were failing me. Now, mind you, they weren't suffering to that point, but they weren't as good as I wanted them to be. I was getting like C's when I should have been getting B's and A's. So when they came in, they said I didn't do. So when my mother comes in for this meeting, they tell her I don't do any work. I don't turn any homework. I just sit in class. They think that they felt like I should be in a different classroom, not theirs. And so it was like luckily, my mother wasn't that person to go along with those type of things. And my mother had also worked in the school district. She had worked for Chicago Public Schools. So she knew this was wrong because she had my test scores. And so, see, the thing is, when you're talking about systemic racism and things like that, the assumption was, and my mother told me, because she was hot when she came home, was that she didn't know anything. They were talking to her like she was uneducated. Like she didn't, they was telling her I was in the wrong spot, that this is where I need to be. They wanted to take me down to the lowest level they could. But of course, not knowing who my mother was. Now mind you, my mother was very confused because I kept telling them I'm doing it and they're not helping me. So my mother was semi-prepared. So So when we were there, so apparently, they were just like, she doesn't do anything, she's lazy. And my mother was like, no, my daughter comes in and does her homework, and we check her homework. So no, we know she's doing her homework, but they swore I didn't turn in any homework. I wasn't doing any work. I was just sitting in class doing nothing. That's what they said. And so my mother was like, oh no, that's not the truth. And so, because my mother's who she is, she came prepared. So she had my test scores, my standardized test scores, all these things that show that no, she is supposed to be in this class, and she is very intelligent, or gifted, as they used to say. So if there's a problem, there's a problem with you all. She said, and I know she's doing her homework because I sit there and I watch her do it, and I know she takes it out of this house every day. So it got to the point my mother was signing off on my homework. It was very stressful. Not only was I dealing with the racism of my teachers, who clearly did not like me, and after the meeting with my mother, they were begrudgingly helping me. It was very much so that it was very clear to me as a 10-year-old that these people did not want to help me, that they didn't want me to have this education that I was deserving, that was my right. And then on top of it, I'm dealing with the racism of the children, because not only was I dealing with that, but then on top of it, I had kids, listen, when you are the true minority, then or when people feel empowered, and that's what we're going to talk about in my next unedited one, their true selves come out. And so, I was being called nigga by these little white kids, and I was fighting, but I was smart enough not to fight where I got caught. Here's the thing. Let me tell you something. Louise never got caught fighting in school, because I would do stuff like walk behind them and muff them, hit them real, and they could never catch me doing it. So, or do other things, catch them, strip them. I was a sneaky little thing. So that was very stressful for a 10-year-old. And so it started to affect my health. I had asthma at the time, and I was having asthma attacks. I got to the point that I didn't want to go to school. I was like begging not to go to school. So my mother had to find me another school to go to finish out the year. Now, what I'm going to say about this is that it was bad, but it also taught me something. And it taught me that your brain is a weapon. And that's what my parents told me. My father told me. He said, look at what they're doing to you and see what they're trying to take away from you. And so, and it was like, well, they're trying to take away, they're trying to say that I'm not smart. They're trying to take away my my work, my school. He said, exactly. See, because that's the thing that people want to take away from you. The thing that makes you strong, the thing that makes you powerful is your brain. Not, you can fight somebody, but with your fist, but really the way you fight somebody and win is with your brain. And they don't want you to have that. And so that taught me at 10 to understand that I had to do more, that I had to be more because of the color of my skin, and that people would try to take away what was rightfully mine because of the color of my skin. And so I have never, even though as a teenager and stuff, you don't really take, you might have moments where you're like, whatever, but I understand that what's in my head can never be taken away from me, and that it is so important, education, and it's so important to learn and always learn and stay a person that is of the learning community, in some shape or form. I always say you should be more than you were yesterday and less than you'll be tomorrow, because you should always be evolving and changing and learning and growing. And that was the beginning of making me understand that the color of my skin predicated so many things to so many people, that they superseded so much of me just based on the color of my skin. And I'm saying all this because there is going to be another unedited one coming up in a couple of days, because I wanted to put this out here to maybe make better sense of what I'm going to say on my next unedited LuuLuu. But yeah, I just wanted to share this story because I think that it's important, besides talking about perfume, besides talking about, things, as I sit here and I'm just making this LuuLuu, and it's, this is my channel and it's going to be whatever I choose it to be, that I share other things besides the happy, joy, and the fun and everything, and talk kind of, on serious, not necessarily serious subjects, but on things that are part of this world. And systemic racism is part of our world, and it has always been. This water is driving me insane. It's real, and many of us have experienced it, sometimes earlier in our lives than you would ever believe. I have a friend that told me real talk. In her school, in her class of little black kids, she had a white teacher, and she had them singing, what was the song? She had them acting like they was picking cotton in class, and some in a song that was very much a very racist, very, I can't remember the song, but it was like, what? And those are the things that sometimes that happen, and still happen. Maybe not quite as blatant as they were when we were young, but they still happen. But they do. And so the systemic racism is real, and sometimes we try to rise above it, but sometimes we get pulled back into the reminders of the what we know was out there, and we were hoping that it had gone away some. All right, that's it. I'm done. Talk to y'all later.